Wizard of Oz Sing-Along. On Turner Classic Movies in 2002, a special sing-along edition of the 1939 classic film The Wizard of Oz aired. This edition would have interstitial segments hosted by Robert Osborne and the Powerpuff Girls. No, I am not making that up. As fever-dreamish as that might sound, it was surprisingly not that noteworthy, as these segments never re-aired, or if they did, it wasn't very often or recent. Really, the entire thing ended up being an advertisement though, as it was pretty much done just to promote the Powerpuff Girls' own movie. But I don't understand what Turner was even thinking, because the overlap for TCM and Cartoon Network's demographics is basically nothing. Only a few clips and some footage from a promo are available today, and it's unknown if Turner themselves have preserved anything.
I do too know how to read.
You're so lying.
Cut it out! You're embarrassing me in front of Mr. Osborne. Robert!
The Hemingway Suitcase Manuscripts. One of the most well-known American authors, Ernest Hemingway, has still had some of his works not make it to the public view. These were the Suitcase Manuscripts. The story is that a suitcase full of Hemingway's earlier manuscripts was stolen in Paris in 1922. Hemingway believed he had copies of these works, and didn't initially sweat losing them, but those copies were also in the suitcase, which meant that a lot of those manuscripts of one of the most influential 20th century writers just vanished before his career had really started. Only 2 of the stories in the suitcase were able to be recovered as copies were found. Hemingway divorced his wife after this incident, as her leaving the suitcase unattended was the reason it was stolen. Those manuscripts are some of the least likely lost media to ever be found. Layton 7. Layton 7 was a spin-off of the Professor Layton series that was to be exclusively available on mobile platforms. Even though it was actually planned to be the 7th Professor Layton game, the title is purely coincidental, as the number 7 refers to the number of characters. At its original announcement, all that was really known was that it was to be a puzzle RPG with some differences in gameplay from the typical Professor Layton games. 2 years after this original announcement, in 2015, there was another announcement, and details about the gameplay revealed it was very different than the original announcement. The object of the game this time would be to catch a vampire. There would be a day-night cycle with different actions available in each to accomplish this. I'm skipping over a lot, but that's basically the gist. And in 2018, the website for the game was no longer available, suggesting the project was cancelled. There's no official announcement about this, but given the fact that no news was ever given to this day, that's likely what happened. The Smell of Vengeance. Before the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, there was Grim and Evil, a 22-minute time slot that Grim Adventures shared with Evil Con Carne, which was basically an entirely different show. One was clearly more successful than the other, so this arrangement only lasted 1 season before Billy and Mandy got the whole time slot to itself. With this entry, we're talking about the other show. The Smell of Vengeance is an episode of Evil Con Carne that is completely found in its altered version. Its original version was changed due to similarities to the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks. While a lot of shows just banned episodes for this reason, Evil Con Carne decided to keep the episode around and just change it. The episode shows a bird's eye view of a smoke-covered New York City skyline, and people jumping out of the World Trade Center, which obviously wasn't going to make it on TV in 2001. But it's still lost 24 years later, even when other 9/11 altered and banned episodes have seen releases in the decades since. Nightmare. Nightmare was a 1982 Atari arcade game, and is possibly one of the first examples ever of a horror game. The object was to enter people's dreams and fight against their nightmares. Atari commissioned General Computer Corps to develop this game, but it was cancelled for unknown reasons. General Computer Corps actually existed until 2015 until being shut down, and did make quite a few games such as Crazy Otto, the template for what would become Miss Pac-Man. Nightmare was actually similar to Tron gameplay-wise, but never ended up being publicly playable in the arcades. It was playable at an expo, and so we do have some footage, but the game is still functionally lost. Please Don't Eat the Daisies. This sitcom from the 1960s was based on a movie from 1960, which was based on a book from 1957. It was a simple family sitcom about a woman trying to keep her husband, 4 sons, and dog in line. In its time, it was hated by audiences and critics for having stories that were either cliched, or in some cases, stories that didn't even make sense. Despite being hated so much, it still managed to get a second season. In retrospect, this just resulted in more lost media, since there's more episodes to find about a 1960s show people forgot about. There aren't any full episodes of the show available publicly. There were reruns in the 90s and early 2000s, and so maybe some of those recordings could be found. A combination of 15 other episodes are out there, owned by private collectors, the Library of Congress, and the UCLA Film Archive. Wizardream. The 1980s movie Troll has an unknown spin-off that went unreleased, entitled Wizardream. Being a high-concept fantasy movie in the 2010s and being a spin-off of a known IP, and having the same director as that IP, this film should have been a slam dunk. It wasn't, however. The movie's production was finished by 2013, while the movie's social media accounts were promoting it until 2016, suggesting there still was intent to release the movie long after it was finished. The filmmaker died in 2019, tragically, meaning closure isn't very likely. While IMDb says Wizardream was released in 2021, I found no evidence of a release actually happening then or at any point. Early versions of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. One of the best-selling Wii games of all time, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, was not that different from any other side-scrolling Mario game. Knowing that, you'd think the game wouldn't have gone through many changes during development, but wrong you were if you thought that. From the version shown in the trailer at E3 2009, the level design wasn't actually that different from the final game, but the UI changed majorly to the final version. The sound effects in this version are different and not as numerous, and certain elements like the coins and flagpole changed quite a bit as well. The version that was playable at E3 2009 was even different to the version shown in the trailer. Some of the animations and sound effects in this version weren't complete, or were borrowed respectively, but even this version was more polished than what was shown in the trailer. Obviously, since these pre-release builds were never intended for public ownership, they're lost, and will likely remain that way. One Piece cross Star Wars. To promote the One Piece Gold movie, One Piece did a collaborative short in Japanese movie theaters. That short was played before screenings of The Force Awakens, and showed the cast of One Piece dressed up as Star Wars characters going to see The Force Awakens in a theater. The short caused controversy when it was in theaters, as Japanese audiences just viewed it as a cash grab, and after 2015 it pretty much became forgotten. There haven't been any uploads of the short on the internet, and the short hasn't been released officially in any way. Seeing as it was a simple short that aired before a movie, it wasn't exactly designed for long-term viewing, so it doesn't seem likely that this short will ever be viewable again. The Price is Right, Dennis James episodes. From 1972 to 77, the syndicated version of The Price is Right was hosted by a man named Dennis James. Obviously, because Bob Barker is more iconic, he was more associated with the early Price is Right, but that doesn't mean there's not intrigue with the James episodes. There was a notable incident, for example during the Cliffhangers game. James called the mountain climbing character Fritz at one point and said, "There goes Fritz," which caused one of the models to run off crying as her husband named Fritz had disappeared while climbing a mountain in Afghanistan. James apparently didn't know that happened. That incident was often cited as the reason James didn't continue hosting, but really, his contract just expired. Bob Barker was a big reason for James' episodes to not be aired in reruns, as the fur coats given away on the show conflicted with his advocacy for animal rights. These factors, when put together, led to an overall forgetfulness in the public about James' time hosting The Price is Right. This resulted in only a few episodes surviving in the modern day, with a majority of them being lost.